for the first time in my life, I'm experiencing what it means to want human connection. And like, I could literally start crying about it right now. Like, it feels really good. It's safe to connect with people, and it's okay to keep figuring it out. And like, you just got to love yourself through it. Like, I'm still figuring it out. I still like, we're still figuring it out. We're still like, I'm still learning who I am.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm an adult and I'm coming out and I'm loving it. And sometimes I hate it and it's scary, but I'm still figuring out what that means. And it's great. And I'm so glad that I have you guys.
We love you.
Welcome to Something More Human. I'm Sam.
And I'm Elliot. We're a married couple exploring human connection and its impact on ours, our guests, and our listeners' lives.
Join us in creating something more human. In the studio today, / our living room, is Meghan Davis and Serena Robella. And we're so excited to have you here. And we're so excited for you, the people listening, because this is one of my very, very close friends. And we're going to get into it. Did something transformational happen to you in the last couple of years?
So I moved to Albuquerque, where I met Sam and Elliot in 2017. And then I moved back to San Diego in 2022, like summer. And I started going through this interesting transformation where I started kind of discovering my sexuality a bit more. And then it really solidified when I laid eyes on this beauty over here. And
she's not talking about me, for those of you who are listening only.
Yes, Serena. And so in early 2023, I came out, and it's been a wild journey. It's been great, but it's definitely been, terrifying being 26 and coming out of the closet, which everyone refers to it as my glass closet. But
Interesting. Why? Elaborate.
I think that to like quite a few people, it's been obvious. It's something I've always like known about myself, but not really like even been willing to think about. But it's something I've known probably since I was like 13 or 12. And I think that my glass closet has just, I've been hiding in the closet, but it's completely see-through.
You two bring both of these really interesting journeys and perspectives because, like you just said, Meghan, it took you this journey into adulthood before you really like stepped out of the closet, whether it was made of cedar or made of glass. And Serena, for you, how old were you when you came out?
I was a sophomore in high school, so I came out pretty early, but I knew I liked women since I was about 5. Like pretty much, or maybe even, I have this certain memory of the first time I've ever liked a girl, and I was pretty sure I was in a diaper still.
And how was your, because you've used the word terrifying, and we'll talk about that, but how was it for you? How was that process? What did it look like? Is there a specific story that comes to mind or?
Yeah, so her and I talk about this all the time, how there's just a different experience coming out earlier versus later. And there comes a lot of conflicts with that. I would probably categorize it as more, when you come out earlier, there's a lot more external issues versus when you come out later, it's a lot more internal issues because of the suppression. But for example, for my story, I came out sophomore year. I was dating men, literally could not do it anymore. I was like, absolutely not. Tolerance is at 0%. It was freeing. And I was very lucky that at my high school, nobody gave me any issues. So a lot of people do experience issues at school. And especially if you're a gay man, men are a lot more not cool with that. But as a lesbian in San Diego, I was fine.
I'm actually shocked to hear that. I'm shocked to hear that you had almost 0 issues in school after coming out. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, literally, I can't recall one. But my home life was a wreck. I come from a very traditional Italian family. And, I used to be with makeup, long blonde hair and, you know, the transition into like what I am now, it's taken since then for my family to fully accept me pretty much. My grandma was probably the biggest nightmare. I got kicked out of my house twice. I had to support myself too, like a few times in my life. And it was honestly traumatizing. And the feeling of being alone and nobody there to really understand you was something in itself.
How soon from coming out, you're a junior in high school, to the first time that you got kicked out? Like, what is that timeline?
Oh, yeah. So it was sophomore.
Sophomore.
So I actually hadn't moved out. I was still a senior, and I moved out because I just couldn't handle my family. And then I ended up moving back in, and then I got kicked out officially about a year in, and then I was out, and I had to work and go to school. It was a really difficult time. And then finally, honestly, I hate to say this, but when my grandma started getting Alzheimer's, that's when she started being a lot nicer to me about the issue or the subject. It's not an issue. But like even now, like Meghan comes in the house and she's like, "Oh, there's my blonde beauty." And she's like, "So when are you guys getting married?" And like she
literally every day.
That's really nice though.
Yeah,
That's
no,
really
so
sweet.
it's really nice that it got a lot easier. But I mean, like I said, I'm 27 now. I came out at like 15, took that many years to like finally be at a comfortable spot.
Yeah, it's a long time.
And another thing that I'm thinking of too is when you come out so young, your family's not going to, they're going to think it's a phase or somebody influenced you. They don't take you seriously. And even my grandma, my grandpa, my mom literally told me this to my face. They're like, "Well, we thought it was a phase and we thought someone was influencing you because apparently at that age, you don't have a mind of your own."
Right.
So I'd say that would summarize my coming out.
Meghan, how did it look for you? You're an adult, right? So like you've gone off, you've left the town that you grew up in to go to college, you graduated and then moved back. How was that journey coming out to your parents, those close to you as an adult?
Honestly, wild. Like, so I'm going to kind of like go back to the beginning of when I kind of started to notice like these differences in myself. So being in middle school, as you know, everyone knows, you start to experience these hormonal changes. You're going through puberty. And I noticed myself kind of taking this liking to girls. But in my mind, it was, and maybe it was just my upbringing. Like I grew up very Catholic, like my family is very Irish Catholic. And so I kind of had this thought of, oh, well, this is what you can do in private, but meaning, you know, like girls, or have some sort of involvement with girls, but you're with men on the outside. Like in public, you're with men. In private, you're allowed to be this. But in no way do those two worlds collide. And so I think over time, that's something that was like really confusing for me to figure out what, you know, how do I combine these two people that I'm living as? And throughout high school, you know, there were times where I was maybe mildly interested in women, or like other women were interested in me. And I kind of just went along with it, which I realized not everyone does. And I just thought, oh, maybe that's just like, oh, we're just like teenagers. Like, this is what we do. And I'm like, oh, wait, no, that's not what everybody does. And even though I never pictured myself moving back to San Diego, like to be close to my family, it felt like the right thing to do. And one of the biggest things that I noticed as soon as I moved back and meeting a bunch of people was this shift in the people that I started to notice. And the people I started to notice were women. And I think because I was surrounded by a lot more people, like San Diego is so much more populated than Albuquerque. It's just a much bigger city. There's just a lot more people in it. And I was doing a lot more activities and meeting a lot of more people, whether it was, going back to school or my sister lives in San Diego. So I got to meet a lot of people through her. And so I started just noticing women, or like I'd go out to eat and I'm like, oh, like that server is really cute. Like, I'm like, am I flirting right now? Like, what does that even mean? Like, this is so new for me. And so I kind of just like let myself observe it. And then I went with one of my best friends to go get a tattoo from Serena. And I walked into this tattoo shop and I see her and I'm like, what? I kid you not, like I could not stop staring at her. Like I sat myself across the room because I didn't know how to like sit close to her. And I guess she noticed. And I felt like, I felt embarrassed, but at the same time, like I like wasn't. And then I caught myself like going on social media more because we had followed each other on social media. And I'm not really like a big social media user. Like I feel like over the years I've kind of cut back on how much I'm on Instagram or whatever. And I would catch myself strictly going on Instagram to look at her stories and find a way to reply to them. and I'm like, oh my God, love your shirt. And it's like a sloth or whatever.
That's so funny. That's cute.
And then I asked our mutual friend, I'm like, hey, make sure you invite Serena to our birthday party because we were going to do a joint birthday party. And I probably like reiterated this to our mutual friend like at least 5 times. I'm like, make sure you invite her. And then this mutual friend of ours, she's like, oh yeah, like telling Serena, if you get Meghan drunk enough, like she'll make out with you. And I'm like, I don't have to be drunk to do that. Like,
really quick, I want to go back to, you said that she noticed that you were staring a lot.
Yeah.
I just wanted to kind of go back to your version of that first meeting because I haven't heard about that and I want to hear about, because it's funny, it's like maybe you thought you were being sly or maybe you didn't. Maybe you were like, Jesus Christ, I'm staring at her and she's probably gonna notice and I'm really embarrassed or whatever, but she did notice. And I think that that's funny and sweet and I like to hear about it.
Okay, so the moment she walked in the shop, I was just like dumbfounded. I'm like, and I mean this in the most wholehearted way. I was like, smash. Like the most respectful way possible. I just
the angels are coming out of the sky.
With the trumpets, it's like smash. No, but I knew she was someone I wanted to get to know. So I'm sitting there drawing up our friend Amanda's tattoo, and I just from the corner of my eye I could see her staring. And also too, I'd like to say my gaydar is the most accurate thing in the world. I can tell somebody's gay before they even know they are. I've never been wrong either.
And you knew that Meghan was gay. I
knew it, and that's why I was like, so Amanda, like, what's up with Meghan? She's like, oh no, she's straight.
And you're like,
okay, I don't know about that. I just knew she was important, and that's why whenever she slid up on my story or something, I literally our first like conversation, I pretty much I said, oh no, it was my dog at the tattoo shop. And
of course I had to comment, you know, of course. I'm like, oh, what a cute dog.
And I was like, the
perfect way in.
And the first message I replied, I'm like, oh, Maggie and I are waiting for you to be lesbian. That was like literally one of the first things I said.
Oh wait, but I reply, sounds like Maggie and I are waiting for the same thing. And I'm like, Meghan, I'm like, what are you trying to hide here? Like, there's nothing to hide. Like, I'm like speaking my truth, but mentally staying in denial. Like, what's the point of that?
Yeah.
Going back to my family, that's been really tricky for me. I struggled a lot with various issues at a young age, and the whole concept of like, oh, it's just a phase. Like, I was still worried as like a 26-year-old that that's how my family was going to interpret me coming out. Because I think in some sense, my family still sees me as this really fragile teenager. And so I was worried that that was going to continue, because it has continued in most things in my life. And so this was one of those things like, oh, this is really big. Like, this is a really big transition and a really big thing for me to be open and honest and vulnerable about with my family that I'm already not super close with, but I knew it was important that I shared my truth. And it was really scary to share that without the concern that they were going to think it was a phase, even as an adult. But so far it's been okay. I mean, it's gone better than I expected, and we've been inseparable ever since. And I think in some sense, like I generally have a hard time like connecting with people, which I feel like maybe that's partially why it kind of took me a while to come to terms with embracing this part of myself. Serena has been like a huge proponent in me doing that. And I'm really grateful for it, because I don't think I would have embraced it. I'm not going to say flawlessly, because that's not how it's been, but with such ease.
Yeah, after our first date, I'm like, oh, like this person's the one for me. I literally started saving up for someday to get her a ring.
Oh, yeah.
But I started doing that after our first date.
So obviously you two have talked about marriage because you're here talking about a ring. I want to know how quickly, and I guess I'm asking because I'm curious, like, just relating to us, how we talked about it pretty quick, but how quickly did you both talk about that? Like, how did that topic come up?
My feelings for Serena skyrocketed. We had our first date, and then we like spent a whole week together. And then I was like, done. I'm in. Drove to her house immediately. And I was like, hey, I think I'm falling in love with you.
You actually said that?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's faster than you.
And how did you respond?
Meghan shows up at my door, and I'm like, oh, that's it. She's breaking up with me. I'm like, there goes my hopes and dreams. Well, then, no, she ended up saying that. And it was like such a relief. And I'm like,
what a roller coaster of emotions that you probably went through in like the span of like 5 minutes. Like from thinking like, oh, this is over. I think I love this woman, and now it's over, to like, she's literally telling me that she's falling in love with me. Like, that's opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, exactly. And then also too, this was the first time in my life that I've ever had somebody treat me good. And, within my past, not only relationships, but family, I've basically, even friendships, I've been treated like literal dirt, and Meghan has treated me better than and loved me better than anybody in my life. And just dating her, I've made so many upgrades to myself, and I've cut a lot of people off that I didn't realize before were bad for me, but she helped me realize that and realize I deserve better. And also, going from toxic relationships, whether they were gay, straight, whatever it may be, and finding a healthy one is a crazy thing in itself. But then even for us, like, Meghan being the first woman relationship on top of healthy relationship, and then me just healthy relationship in general, it's like, it's a roller coaster in itself. And there's always it's like twists and turns everywhere. We were very good at communicating and patience. And that's why I feel we're so successful, is because of that.
Yeah.
And, it takes a lot of, I'm sure you guys can agree too, that like we all have insecurities from the past. And, especially ones that can take over, sometimes you have to push those down and not let that affect the other person or project it onto someone else. Instead of projecting something toxic, just talk about it.
Right.
Kind of going back to your question about the marriage conversation, though, I feel like that started maybe like 3 or 4 months in.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh. And then in my mind, I'm like, oh, wait, well, that's okay because Sam and Elliot did that.
Like 3 months.
Like literally, I was like, it's okay because Sam and Elliot.
That's great.
Well, because I remember like Sam and I got close like in 2019. So before we became close, I was like, oh my gosh, like 4 months. That's literally insane. Like literally nuts. And then I met, like, I feel like I actually met you. And I'm like, well, no, that's not insane. Because then I started hanging out with you both, and I became not only friends with you as an individual, Sam, or you, Elliot, but like I became friends with you as a couple, and it totally made sense. Like, of course, you guys are the perfect match. And then I met Serena, and I'm like, this all makes sense now.
And I also was like, okay, it's 5 months and now we're engaged. Is this crazy? Are we crazy? But because Elliot's mom, how old was your mom when your parents got married?
19.
She was 19, yeah. So I was 19 when we met. I think I was 20 when we got engaged. And just knowing that your mom could relate to me in that way, I felt so much more like,
I don't know if I knew this.
yeah, like it's not that crazy. It could be perceived as crazy, but people have done it and have had success. Like your parents have been married 40 plus years.
Right. I mean, things were a little bit different back then. Like that was more normalized. My grandma got married when she was 15 and had 6 kids by the time she was 21.
Oh.
Yeah. But
Wild.
I think that it's interesting that we're both saying the same thing. Like we said it then, and like some of my friends said it, and you're saying it now, Meghan, like, oh, 4 months, that's crazy. And I just wonder like where we get this. Obviously, like we could say, for lack of a better explanation, it's like society, but it's interesting that we think the way we do about time, like 4 months is crazy. Like says who? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like you're supposed to take time to fall in love.
Yeah, says who?
Like don't like go off like your own feelings. Go off of this timeline of like, oh well, it takes this long to develop love, and it takes this long to have commitment, and then it takes this long to have a long enough commitment to where you're ready enough to put a ring on it, to move in together, to sign the piece of paper, to have a family. What's
interesting is that our last guest, Christina, basically said more about breakups though, like you shouldn't get perspective, you shouldn't get advice from like 20 people, right? Like because everyone's, has a different perspective, and that could get in the way of like your decision making. But in the same way, I think that we hear it so much and we think about it so much because so many people are telling us this because they've all been in bad relationships, right? And they're like, oh, I got into love too fast, and look what happened to me. Like, don't do this thing, or maybe it's out of jealousy or is out of bitterness. I'm like, where else would it come from? And I think that's what it is that so many people have had shitty relationships and have been betrayed by love. They're like, well, it didn't happen to me, so it couldn't happen to you. So why would you ever think that you could, think about marriage in the first few months?
We've talked about before, the 2-year mark is usually when people start to get like a little bit fussy. And that's usually kind of the biochemical time frame where that initial flood of endorphins wears off. But the thing that Christina mentioned, our last guest, was about sort of this mutual effort. And you already said it, Serena, like we're good at communicating and we both have a desire to make it work. And I think when you can recognize that in a relationship, there's no right time. There's no like, well, if we wait 2 years and our dopamine starts to downgrade, then we'll know if this is real or not. Like, no, it's this mutual effort, and you're riding the high of falling in love, and you should, you know?
Interesting that you're saying that because Meghan, we've talked to you obviously since you've been here over the last week, and you have sort of a different story. She was saying that you met, she met you at the right time. And I'm not saying, of course, you met her at the wrong time, but there's some other things that have been going on. Like, life has been intense for you. So how is that, do you think, like, how do I ask this? Coming out is like a big deal, right? But to also be going through so many changes in your life, can you sort of talk about, can you talk about that?
Well, one thing that I wanted to mention was when I did move back to San Diego, I kind of what I was talking about earlier, I just like started noticing these shifts in what I was observing internally. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I tried to open up to my friends about it. And I was like, hey, like, I think I'm like interested in women. And my friends would come right back to me and be like, no, you're straight. I'm like, okay, great. That's super supportive. Thanks. That's also made it really hard because I think it's just it's always been hard for me to be open and honest with people, like on a genuine level of like trusting people to really understand like the depth of myself. And maybe that sounds like a little bit corny or cheesy, but like I know that I'm the type of person that like feels really deeply, and I always have been. Like even as a kid, I've always super introverted, really shy. Like I was in a play group as a kid, and all the kids would be playing, and I would be the kid alone on the swings because that was my happy place. I have had a lot of turmoil in my life, just like a really troubled and like anxious child. Like I had some friendships like that I was just really close to one specific person, and all of a sudden like we weren't friends anymore, and like, you know, this is like really early on. I was devastated, like to where I couldn't make more friends. I think I was in like 6th grade. I like started to experience depression. Like I hated going to school. I wanted to be homeschooled. I didn't have any friends. I just felt so alone in the world. I like started going to therapy. And then middle school, I mean, all these things kind of started surfacing around the same time of like, I noticed myself liking girls and thinking, I can't do that. I can't like women. That's not acceptable. And that being kind of like this learned behavior and learned thought process. And I think partially because of my family. I mean, my dad is, he's not like the most conservative person, but he did grow up in the 50s in the South. Like that's just a fact that a specific type of person comes out of that. And my dad and I have never had a good relationship. And that kind of just worsened over the years. And me and my sister, just growing up, we never had a good relationship. We fought all of the time. My whole family dynamic, honestly, it was super unhealthy. All I wanted to do was escape, but I couldn't, obviously, because I was a kid. So I turned to some really unhealthy habits, and I developed a really terrible eating disorder. I struggled with self-harm. I just became super anxious, super depressed. And my freshman year of high school, I ended up in a hospital. Like I was in a treatment center for, I think, 9 months. I don't recognize myself as that person anymore. I've grown so much from it, but I look back and, you know, it's sad to think that a kid is struggling so badly with those types of things. And part of, you know, what it boils down to is just not knowing how to love yourself in any which way. And I know that part of that was me not letting myself love who I am despite who I love. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
But I grew up really fast. I just basically, like, everyone's like college experience was my high school experience. I just kind of went off the rails a bit. But then I simmered down, and I realized like, okay, I need to tap back into myself and like what I need and what I love and what I understand. But at the same time, I was living under this household and amongst these people that were just trying to suppress me. And I hate to say that my family is a big contributor to that, but unfortunately, like, I'll be honest and say that they are. And I know that they love me, and I know that they care about me, but I don't think my family has ever really understood how to love me the way that I've needed, because they're all very different than I am. Like, we just have very different temperaments. Anyway, moving forward, in 2016, I experienced probably like one of the most traumatic events of my life. I got in an argument with someone, and they just went haywire. They got really angry, and they attacked me, and I ended up in the hospital with a shattered collarbone. And I got 11 screws and a metal plate put in. And I was in a sling for 3 months, which at this time, I was trying to get my dance degree. I was trying to, I wasn't sure if I wanted to dance professionally, but I knew that like I wanted to dance in college and like make dance a part of my future career in some way. And that happening, I had zero function of my entire arm. Like I couldn't even lift a finger. And that really set me back in so many ways, whether it was emotionally, socially, professionally, like so many things. And I think that in that moment, something clicked in my head of, you can't trust anybody. You can't. And I just kind of, I just kept suppressing myself further and further. My desires for anything, my needs, my wants, basically hit an all-time low where I became like a walking shell of a human, which is really sad to think about. And it's something that I still struggle with today. But I know that was a really big proponent in why coming out was really hard, because that meant coming out of that shell, breaking that vulnerability barrier. Even just, dating Serena and getting to know her, like a lot of emotional shit that I've been hiding, even from myself, is coming out. And in this past year, I felt so incredibly overwhelmed with emotions, whether it's been like sadness or depression or anxiety or overwhelm, or, I don't even know how to describe it in words, to be honest. But it's also changed my perspective on like what love actually means and what closeness means and what friendship means, what platonic relationships mean, what romantic relationships mean. It's changed the way that I like see other people, or like being open and accepting of like other people's love relationships even, right. Or that like I'm allowed to be loved, and I'm a resistor. Flat out, I resist.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. It's hard for me to feel as though like I can let people into my life. And I hate to like make the excuse of, well, I've been hurt so many times that like I just don't want to let anyone in. No, like I already didn't want to let anyone in. And then on top of that, like I've been burned. And on top of that, I have hated myself beyond belief. And learning to love myself, learning to accept myself, learning to love other people, and that like it's okay. Like it's okay to have feelings. It's okay to be emotional. It's okay to be vulnerable, but it's also okay to be strong. It's okay to, fight back your tears sometimes, but it's okay to let them out. It's been this like conflicting thing of you can be strong in your moments of weakness, and you can be, I don't want to say weak, but like you can be weak in your moments of strength.
I always tell everybody I meet, like I am an open line of communication. And if there's anybody even on this podcast, I've never met you, I don't know who you are or anything, like even message me through Instagram. Like if you're confused or just want somebody that understands to talk to, like you can directly message me.
Yeah.
I want to be there for people. And that's kind of my contribution to human connection, is like, I want to be there for people who feel like they can't talk to anybody else.
Serena, something you said reminded me of things that people can take away from this is, if you're feeling like the only, that there are a lot of people out there who've gone through hell and back and who are down to talk about it with you. Even if it is a therapist, even if it's a friend or a stranger, seeking out those kinds of connections will make you feel more connected, less lonely, and more capable to like go take on the world.
It takes literally one person to change your life.
Yeah, it's okay to lean a little bit. And I'm trying to learn how to lean. One other thing I wanted to add was patience. Like be patient with yourself. Like just like you're going to try and be patient with other people, like be patient with yourself and your feelings and your thoughts and all of it. It's going to change. Every day it's going to be different, but like be patient with any and all of it.
I would be curious from both of you. You're talking about this kind of journey of self-discovery, and it also sounds a little bit of like self-love and this vulnerability barrier. How has turning inward and discovering your sexuality, accepting it, and then letting it out into the world, how has that transition with that been in your relationships with other people? So like you're talking about love, your relationship with Serena, the way that you see friendships, family relationships. Like, do you feel like you're interacting with the world in a different way now?
100%. I have so much more confidence in who I am. And that's not all the time. Sometimes I still kind of experience this shyness and this closed offness, which I'm really working on. But even with my friends, I'm just kind of like, here I am. So, like I said, take it or leave it.
What's interesting is you're saying you're very closed off. And before we had, this idea, to the audience was like very new. Like we weren't planning on doing this at all. But you guys were here and we had such good conversations right away. Like, why would we not have this conversation? But you've been saying, like, I don't know how much, I'll share. And I'm pretty closed off person. But I think what I love about this is that I feel like with the right people in your life, like you're not at all. And I think that is sort of a sign that you're surrounding yourself with the right people, because you're saying you're closed off, but this is the most open I've ever seen you in your whole life on this podcast. And I think that's a testament to like the closeness that we have, and us now, of course, the four of us, but especially the three of us. Yeah, I just think that's really powerful, because to me, you're not. You're saying you're closed off, but to me, clearly you're not a closed off person, but it just depends on who you're with. And I think if you can be open like this with, people in San Diego, that's just a sign that that you've met the right people. And with that in mind, how do you find, both of you, knowing how important it is to find people that you can love and be loved by and be vulnerable with? How do you find people that are like you? For the audience who's maybe looking to do the same thing, who feels like you, like they just came out and they're, how do I find people like this that I can relate to? Because that's a big deal.
That identify with this journey.
Yeah.
Or at least maybe not relate to. We can't relate with coming out, but we can at least be there for you and let you be who you need to be. So
I had one of my students reading a book in our like waiting area. And I asked her, oh, like, what book are you reading? She's like, oh, I'm actually reading this book for this queer women's book club. I'm like, what? This is so exciting. And I've been wanting to actually join a book club. And she was telling me about this San Diego wide book club where just a bunch of women read a book. And they gather at like a coffee shop, I think, or like I think it's mainly at a brewery. And they sit and they break off into groups and they talk about the book. I thought that was one, just an incredible idea. And also a great way. I mean, I haven't participated yet, but I'm definitely really interested in doing that. And I'm sure in a lot of other cities, they have things like that where you can just meet other queer women, to just sit and hang out and like discuss whatever the hell they want, whether it's the book or not, and to, meet other individuals and hear their stories of, okay, what does it mean to like go from being a child to being an adult and everything in between that.
Serena, your experience is more robust because you've obviously been gay longer. Do you want to talk about...
Or like been out longer.
Yes, of course. Been out longer, yes.
The best way I would say for my personal experience is because I don't have answers like a lesbian book club,
right,
a softball, whatever, not to play into the stereotypes. No, I'm literally at Queer Girl San Diego. There literally was a softball sign up. That's where I got that from in my head.
That's sick, honestly.
But cool. I don't have answers like that. But what I can say for me, I'm sure there's a lot of women out there just like me that, don't really have those answers. And I would say that the more you accept yourself and you become more your authentic self, the more you start meeting people that align with you. Mm-hmm. And although I don't go to these specific lesbian whatever clubs, I can say that I've become my authentic self within the last 2 years, and I have just continually met better people. Mm-hmm. I mean, look at where I'm at right now. I'm here with my soulmate, and then you guys are freaking amazing. I'm so grateful for that, but I can also thank myself for allowing myself to become my authentic self. And that's like another reason why I was so excited to do this podcast, is because like I want whether they be lesbian or gay or whatever they identify on the LGBTQ plus spectrum, that it's okay. We're in a day and age where it's okay. And I know there's some situations where it's not, but at some point in your life, I hope everybody is able to start being your authentic self. And that's when you can start really becoming happy. And that's when you'll find your people, your soulmate, the job that aligns with you. It literally, like, accepting even just that little part of your life will start making a lot more things make sense.
Yeah. I love that.
And you might not have to meet other gay people, but you meet people like you guys.
Yeah, that just align with like who you are as a person, or like what you want for your life. I feel like kind of like what you were saying of kind of living as your authentic self and loving who you are at the core. It kind of helps you develop a sense of community and build a community that you really want, which I feel like you guys are doing with this podcast already.
For sure.
I think this is a theme that's come up quite often, is like, what got you here won't get you there. And the thing that gets you there is usually some form of personal development. And I love what you're saying, Serena. The more authentic you can present yourself in the world, the more you'll find people who align with who you truly are and your truth. If you're putting up this front, the people that you're attracting are going to be attracted to that front. And that's not exactly the kind of person that you want to help you grow into that next version of yourself.
And you guys discuss human connection. Well, how can you truly connect with a person if you're not even allowing yourself to be your authentic self? You're not even connecting with yourself.
Right.
Let alone another person.
As you lean into that authentic self, like you start to meet people like that. And I think that that's been happening for us, especially as of like very, very late. Just certain people, even if it's one person, I keep having this idea, like this fantasy of like a community that's like 100 people that I always hang out with every single day. And like, we're just always constantly like talking about cool ideas and like new things and our hopes and dreams and struggles. And it's like, that isn't the way that the world works mostly. Right. And you're like, I'm sure you're wondering where I'm going. So anyway, it does start, like, I'm starting to realize that it does. You're right. Like, once you become more your authentic self, which I feel like I'm becoming with this podcast and the things that we're talking about, the more like that we're sort of like magically, when it's not magic, it's spiritual attraction, like to these people, like meeting Ramon. And it only has to start with one person. It doesn't have to be multitudes of people, to start community, to have community. Yeah. This is a community right here. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And that's really powerful, because I keep telling you, like, when I see a big group of like people walking at the park in the summer, I'm like, oh man, I wish we had that. And I'm like, always so envious and sad. And I'm like, you have no idea what their dynamic is.
Just
like,
one person.
You have no idea if that group is like awesome, or if they don't even know each other. Like, you don't know the context, and it doesn't matter. Like, that's not your life. Like, your life is here, So.
And I think it's like thinking outside the box, right? Like, you don't always have to join a community that's already established. That's an awesome way to meet people. Like, go to a networking event, join a book club, join a softball league. That's a way, but that's not the only way. You can go create the thing that you seek,
Exactly.
We've been talking about so many great things, but, we've talked about how, coming out of the closet is not talked enough, or people who are maybe questioning or exploring or, too scared to come out, that I want to say that everybody whoever's listening is beautiful who they are. And that, my beautiful girlfriend here, has been through hell and back. I've been through hell and back, but guess what? Like, I wouldn't have it any other way. It's worth sometimes going through the mud in order to get to a good place. And I just want people out there to know that it's okay to be yourself. It's okay. If you love a woman and you're a woman, you're allowed to. If you're a man and you love a man, you're allowed to. And you're allowed to align yourself with other people who think that's okay. And you're allowed to build connections with people who want you to be yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that we're in a day and age where you don't have to be so scared anymore.
I love your message. And I think that's like, in my opinion, that is finding that one person, like finding like, it's okay to be yourself, but you really need to find, even if that community is one person, if it's like your spouse, like your soulmate, find that other person that you can be that person around, that you can be yourself around, find that one person that will encourage you to, that will go through the mud with you, and it looks like both of you found that. And it's fucking cool.
As you guys have created this podcast and like listening to your podcast and also meeting Serena, but then also just kind of like getting to know myself and this idea of like living as my authentic self, I feel like for the first time in my life, I'm experiencing what it means to want human connection. And like, I could literally start crying about it right now. Like, it feels really good.
That's
like
great.
the safety of human connection.
Yeah. And like, it's okay to connect with other people. It's safe to connect with people.
Yeah.
And it's okay to keep figuring it out. And like, you just got to love yourself through it. Like, I'm still figuring it out. I still like, we're still figuring it out. We're still like, I'm still learning who I am.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm an adult and I'm coming out and I'm loving it. And sometimes I hate it and it's scary, but I'm still figuring out what that means. And it's great. And I'm so glad that I have you guys.
We love you.
Sam and I want to thank you so much for listening to Something More Human. If you're enjoying the podcast and want to support us, there are plenty of no-cost, minimal effort ways you can do so.
For starters, you can subscribe to the show on your favorite listening platform. You can leave us a 5-star review, drop us a comment with a topic you'd like to hear us discuss in an upcoming episode, and you can also keep up with us on Instagram and TikTok. Give us a follow there at Something More Human. Thanks so much.
Thank you.